He came to the hospital for help, clutching his chest and whispering for air. The room smelled of antiseptic and fear, but the doctor's cold stare cut through both. Nurses hesitated, whispers rippled down the hall, and the line between care and cruelty blurred in an instant. Minutes passed, too many. By the time someone finally moved, the truth had already begun to surface. What drove a man sworn to heal to simply walk away? And what they discovered next would shake the entire hospital to its core.
For nearly 70 years, Mr. Harold Benson had lived a quiet life marked by small rituals and steady kindness. He was the man who greeted every nurse with a smile during his monthly checkups, who baked cornbread for his neighbors on Sundays, who still polished his old shoes before church even when his hands shook. The hospital staff knew him, some because he'd volunteered there for decades, others because he always brought flowers for the front desk. That morning, though, Harold's warmth was shadowed by pain. His chest tightened as he climbed the hospital steps, and his breathing turned sharp, uneven. Yet even as his heart raced, he believed help was only moments away. He trusted the system he'd supported his whole life. He didn't know that on this morning, trust would be met with silence, and that silence would expose something far colder than illness. Pain pulsed through Harold's chest as he stood in the emergency ward, clutching the counter. A young nurse spotted him first, eyes wide, tray trembling, but before she could step forward, the attending doctor appeared. Tall, crisp white coat, expression carved in stone. His eyes flicked over Harold and then past him, as if he were invisible. "Take a seat," the doctor muttered without looking up. The waiting area was full, but Harold could hardly stand. He tried to speak, to explain, but his words caught in his throat. The nurse hesitated, caught between compassion and command. "Doctor, his vitals," she began softly. The man's sharp tone cut through the murmur of the ward. "We'll see him when it's appropriate." Appropriate. The word echoed as Harold sank into a chair, breath shallow. Around him, monitors beeped, shoes squeaked, life moved on, but not for him. Minutes turned heavy, the color draining from his world. A cold sweat glazed his skin. Someone should have brought a stretcher. Someone should have checked his pulse, but no one did. In the corner, two interns exchanged uneasy glances. The nurse whispered again, "He needs help now." The doctor didn't even look up. "I said later." His tone wasn't medical, it was personal. It had an edge Harold had heard before, in restaurants, in offices, in quiet moments when respect depended on the color of his skin. Outside, thunder grumbled and rain pressed against the glass. Harold's hands trembled. He tried to steady his breathing, but his chest locked tighter. A memory flashed. His late wife, laughing in that same hospital room years ago when their granddaughter was born. The place that once meant life now felt like a verdict. Finally, his body gave way. The nurse rushed forward as Harold slid to the floor. Alarms erupted, voices tangled in panic, and that same doctor froze for a fraction too long. Then, a flurry of motion. Staff swarmed, trying to undo the silence that had stretched too far. When they wheeled Harold away, the hallway seemed to hold its breath. Someone muttered that his chart had been ignored. Someone else said there was no record of triage. The truth was scattered across whispers, and in every whisper was guilt. Outside the trauma room, the nurse stood with shaking hands. Her eyes burned with anger and disbelief. This wasn't just a mistake. It felt like proof of something rotten hiding in plain sight. As the red light above the operating room flickered to life, the hospital's chatter quieted. People pretended to focus on their screens, yet every ear strained toward the door.
They didn't know it yet, but what happened in that next hour would make every one of them question what kind of healer looks away and why.
Behind the heavy doors of the operating room, chaos swallowed the air. Lights glared down on Harold's pale face as the team fought to pull him back. The monitor screamed in erratic beeps, each one a brutal reminder of time slipping away. Sweat rolled down the nurse's temple as she compressed his chest, counting silently, praying louder in her heart. They were running out of seconds. Then came the sound everyone dreaded, a long, unwavering tone. Flatline. For a moment, no one moved. The doctor who dismissed Harold earlier stood frozen, hands limp at his sides. The nurse broke the silence, voice trembling with fury. "We could have saved him!" The words hung heavy, slicing through the sterile hum of machinery. Eyes turned toward the man who had walked past Harold hours ago. There was no hiding behind protocol now. Every person in that room knew what his silence had cost. Outside, the hospital's corridors buzzed as the news spread. A patient ignored, a death too preventable to be coincidence. Murmurs turned into outrage. Staff whispered about the way Harold had begged for help, about the looks exchanged, about how quickly his skin color determined his worth. The story broke the walls of that operating room and began to infect every hallway with shame and disbelief. The doctor finally spoke, voice small, almost stunned. I didn't mean," but his words cracked under the weight of truth. Meaning didn't matter. Action did, or the absence of it. As Harold's body lay still beneath the harsh white lights, the hospital seemed to hold its breath, every heart heavy with the same realization. What had just happened wasn't an accident, it was a reflection. And by the time the heart monitor fell silent, one question lingered like smoke in the air. How many others had been left unheard before him? The hospital never quite sounded the same after that day. The hum of chatter softened, as though the walls themselves carried the echo of Harold Benson's final breath. Within a week, an internal review was launched. Committees, statements, apologies. But for those who had stood in that room, nothing could scrub away the memory of that single minute that separated life from silence. The nurse, who had fought for Harold, couldn't sleep for days. She replayed every moment, every word dismissed, every second lost. She started speaking out in meetings about unconscious bias, about invisible lines that divided patients by more than urgency charts. Some listened with guilt, others looked uncomfortable. Yet the truth had already taken root. It was no longer possible to pretend. Harold's story spread. Local journalists picked it up, then national ones. Viewers saw his smiling face, the neighbor who baked bread for everyone, the volunteer who believed in care without color. His death forced an entire system to confront a disease it had long denied. Policy changes came slowly, but awareness came fast. Still, for every headline and promise, the pain remained. Because Harold had only wanted help. He had trusted the people meant to save him, and that trust had been betrayed. Some say the hospital changed after him. A few say it didn't change enough. But no one disagrees that his silence that day spoke louder than any protest that followed. Because racism doesn't always scream. It whispers in the moments we choose not to act, in the seconds we look away. So when the next Harold walks through a door, chest heaving, eyes pleading for help, who among us will have the courage to answer before it's too late?